I'm Margaret Wilson, 68 years old, and I woke up alone in the ICU. The nurse's face told me everything before her words did. While I fought for my life, my son Robert relocated my entire family to Switzerland and emptied my savings accounts. They thought I'd die quietly. They expected me to vanish. They were wrong. I felt betrayal burning through my veins, stronger than any medication. My heart may have failed once, but my resolve never would. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, you understand that burning need for justice. Share where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if you're ready to hear how I fought back and reclaimed what was mine. Before my world collapsed around me, I lived what I considered a blessed life. After 40 years of marriage to my late husband Frank, I settled into a comfortable retirement in our paid-off colonial home in Massachusetts. Frank had left me well provided for with his life insurance and pension, and my own career as a hospital administrator had yielded a substantial 401k. At 68, I had everything I needed: financial security, good health, or so I thought, and most importantly, my family nearby. Robert, my only son, had always been the center of my world. After Frank passed 5 years ago, Robert, his wife Diane, and my grandchildren Emily and Jason became my entire universe. Emily, 12, inherited my love of books and classical music. 8-year-old Jason had his grandfather's mechanical mind and could take apart and reassemble anything electronic by age 6. Looking back, I should have noticed the warning signs. Robert started asking strange questions about my will during Sunday dinners. "Mom, have you updated your estate planning since Dad died?" He'd ask casually between bites of pot roast. Diane began suggesting I sell the house, claiming the stairs would become difficult for me eventually. They offered to manage my finances to make things easier. Then came the missed loan repayments. Robert had started a medical equipment supply company 3 years ago, and while he claimed business was booming, I occasionally overheard tense phone calls. Once, I found a past due notice from his business landlord in his coat pocket when doing laundry during a visit. When I gently asked if he needed help, he became defensive. "I'm a grown man, Mom. I can handle my own finances." My heart condition developed gradually. First came the shortness of breath while gardening, which I attributed to age. Then occasional chest pains I dismissed as indigestion. When I mentioned these symptoms to Robert, a flicker of something crossed his face. Not concern as I would have expected, but something calculating. "We should update your advance directives," he suggested instead of urging me to see a doctor. The night of my heart attack, we were having dinner at my home. I had made Robert's favorite lasagna, and we were discussing Emily's upcoming piano recital when the crushing pain began. I remember collapsing, the room spinning, Emily screaming. Through the fog of agony, I recall Robert's voice, not calling 911 immediately as he should have, but asking Diane, "Where does she keep her financial documents?" I drifted in and out of consciousness during the ambulance ride. The emergency room was a blur of activity, medical terms flying over my head as doctors worked to save my life. "Massive myocardial infarction," someone said. "Prepare for emergency bypass," said another. The last thing I remember before they put me under was Robert standing in the doorway, not rushing to my side, but typing something on his phone. I later learned that Dr. Lawrence, the cardiologist who performed my emergency quintuple bypass, had given me only a 10% chance of survival. The damage was extensive, complicated by my age and the delay in seeking treatment. They placed me in a medically induced coma to allow my body to heal, expecting the worst. What happened over the next 3 weeks while I lay unconscious would have been inconceivable to me before. Nurse Sophia Jackson was the first to notice something wasn't right. While most coma patients receive daily visits from distraught family members, my room remained empty after the first few days. The flowers Robert sent wilted and weren't replaced. My personal items disappeared one by one. "Mrs. Wilson's son stopped requesting updates last week," Sophia noted to her supervisor. "That's unusual for someone whose mother is showing small improvements." Indeed, against Dr. Lawrence's expectations, my vital signs had begun stabilizing. My brain activity increased. My body was fighting back, even as my family had apparently given up on me. When Sophia tried contacting Robert, her calls went to voicemail. The house number was disconnected. The emergency contact information Robert had provided suddenly led nowhere. Concerned, Sophia brought the matter to Catherine Barnes, the hospital's social worker assigned to potential elder abuse cases. "I've seen this before," Catherine told Sophia grimly after reviewing my chart and visitor logs. "But usually they wait until after the funeral to disappear with the money." Catherine began investigating quietly, making calls to my neighbors, checking public records. What she discovered would form the foundation of the devastating truth I would face upon waking. While I fought for my life, my son was executing a plan he must have formulated long before my heart gave out. The day I fully regained consciousness remains etched in my memory with painful clarity. The early morning sunlight filtered through the hospital blinds as I opened my eyes, truly aware of my surroundings for the first time in weeks. The persistent beeping of monitors provided an oddly comforting rhythm. I was alive, contrary to medical expectations. "Look who decided to join us," Nurse Sophia said, her warm smile genuine as she checked my vitals. "You're quite the fighter, Mrs. Wilson." My first coherent thought was of my family. "Robert," I whispered through parched lips. "My grandchildren?" Sophia's smile faltered. She busied herself adjusting my foredrip. "Let me get Dr. Lawrence. He'll be thrilled to see you awake." As my mental fog cleared, I noticed something strange. The side table that should have held my reading glasses, family photos, and the small cross necklace I always wore was empty except for a hospital-issued water cup. When Dr. Lawrence arrived, his surprise at my recovery was evident, but something else lurked behind his professional demeanor. "Mrs. Wilson, your recovery is nothing short of miraculous," he said, checking my cardiac response. "We need to run some tests, but I'm cautiously optimistic about your prognosis." "Where's my family?" I asked directly. "Where's Robert?" Dr. Lawrence exchanged glances with Sophia. "Let's focus on your recovery today," he suggested gently. "You've been through a traumatic experience." For 3 days, I made excuses for Robert's absence. Perhaps he was dealing with the children's school schedules. Maybe the hospital had incorrect contact information. Possibly he was traveling for business. The alternative was too painful to consider. The truth arrived with Brenda Collins from the hospital billing department, who came to discuss irregularities with my insurance coverage. "Mrs. Wilson, your supplemental policy was canceled 3 weeks ago," she explained, scanning her tablet. "And there's been an unusual withdrawal of your automatic billing information from your primary insurance." "That's impossible," I said. "My policies are paid annually." Brenda's expression was sympathetic but firm. "According to our records, your son Robert, acting as your financial power of attorney, made these changes shortly after your admission." Power of attorney? The words felt foreign in my mouth. I never signed such a document. That afternoon, Dr. Lawrence and Catherine Barnes, the hospital's social worker, came to my room together. Their grave expressions confirmed my growing dread. "Mrs. Wilson," Catherine began gently, "I'm afraid we have some disturbing information to share with you." Over the next hour, they outlined what their investigation had uncovered. Robert had indeed presented a power of attorney document one I never signed to gain control of my finances within days of my hospitalization. My primary checking and savings accounts had been emptied. My investment portfolio had been liquidated. My house had been listed with a real estate agent specializing in quick sales. "We've confirmed that Robert, Diane, and your grandchildren departed for Zurich, Switzerland 17 days ago," Catherine explained, showing me copies of property records she'd obtained. "He's established a business there using funds we believe came from your accounts." Dr. Lawrence added gently, "Given your prognosis at the time, it appears they didn't expect you to recover." The reality crashed over me like a physical blow. My son, my only child whom I had loved unconditionally, since the moment he was placed in my arms, had stolen my life savings and abandoned me to die alone. The betrayal was so profound, so complete, that my recently repaired heart felt as though it might shatter all over again. I wept then, deep racking sobs that caused the cardiac monitors to alarm. Sophia rushed in, concerned about my heart rate, but some pains transcend the physical. How could he do this? I kept asking through tears. How could he take my grandchildren away? After the initial shock came anger, a white-hot fury that burned away my tears and forged something new within me. While Sophia and Dr. Lawrence worried about the effect of such intense emotions on my recovery, that anger became my fuel. "I want to see all the documents," I told Catherine the next morning. "Everything Robert signed, everything he took." With the hospital computer, I began researching Swiss banking laws and property regulations, making notes with a pen borrowed from Sophia. I learned about international elder abuse cases and the challenges of recovering stolen assets across national boundaries. During this time, an unexpected friendship developed with my hospital roommate, Harriet Goodman, an 82-year-old former university professor recovering from a broken hip. When she overheard my conversations with Catherine, she shared her own story. "My nephew did something similar with my summer house in Vermont," she told me. "These vultures think we're easy targets because we're older. They're wrong." With Catherine's help, I created a new email account that Robert wouldn't know about and began corresponding with financial abuse authorities. I requested copies of my bank statements and transaction histories, which revealed the methodical way Robert had drained my accounts, always just under amounts that would trigger automatic fraud alerts. In physical therapy sessions, I worked twice as hard as required, but was careful to appear weaker than I actually was when certain hospital staff were present. Catherine had warned me that Robert might have contacts checking on my condition, and I didn't want word of my remarkable recovery reaching him yet. "You're healing faster than anyone I've seen with your level of cardiac damage," Trevor, my physical therapist, remarked during one session. "Whatever's driving you, keep it up." "Justice," I replied simply. "I'm being driven by justice." The path to physical recovery after a massive heart attack and quintuple bypass surgery is neither quick nor easy, especially at 68. Every morning brought new pain as my sternum slowly healed. Each breath reminded me of my mortality. But where many patients might have surrendered to despair or resigned themselves to a diminished existence, I found myself possessed by an unexpected determination. Trevor Wilson, my physical therapist with no relation to me despite the shared surname, quickly recognized this drive. "Most patients I need to push," he said during our third session as I forced myself to complete an extra set of exercises. "You I need to rein in. Save some fight for tomorrow, Margaret." But tomorrow wasn't guaranteed. My recent brush with death had taught me that. And somewhere in Switzerland, Robert was spending my money, building a new life with my grandchildren, believing I would never come after him. My recovery suffered a significant setback when I developed pneumonia 6 weeks after waking from my coma. The infection took hold in my weakened lungs, and for several days, Dr. Lawrence feared we might lose the progress we'd made. "Your mother is a fighter," I overheard him telling someone on the phone, presumably checking on my status for Robert. "But this complication is serious at her age." I gestured for him to hand me the phone. "Tell my son," I wheezed through the oxygen mask, "that his mother says goodbye." I watched Dr. Lawrence's confusion as he relayed my cryptic message. "Let Robert think I was on my deathbed. Let him lower his guard." The pneumonia eventually retreated under aggressive antibiotic treatment, and I resumed physical therapy with even greater intensity. The day I walked unassisted down the hospital corridor was a private victory I celebrated silently. Every step brought me closer to confronting Robert. Meanwhile, Catherine had connected me with Calvin Murphy, an attorney specializing in elder financial abuse. He visited me in the hospital, a tall, distinguished man with silver hair and penetrating eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Wilson, what your son has done crosses multiple state and federal laws," he explained after reviewing the documents Catherine had gathered. "The forged power of attorney alone is a felony. The international transfer of funds complicates matters, but it doesn't make them impossible." Calvin discovered that Robert had established a medical supply export business in Zurich, using my retirement savings as capital. He had purchased a villa in an exclusive neighborhood and enrolled Emily and Jason in an international school that cost more per year than most colleges. Swiss banking privacy laws are legendary, but they've relaxed somewhat for cases involving criminal activity, Calvin explained. "The challenge will be establishing jurisdiction. Your son will argue that as a Swiss resident now, American courts have no authority over him." We achieved a small victory when Calvin secured an emergency court order freezing the few domestic assets Robert hadn't yet transferred, mainly a vacation property in Maine that he'd apparently forgotten about in his haste. The judge, outraged by the evidence of financial elder abuse, also issued a warrant for Robert's arrest should he return to American soil. As my discharge date approached, I faced the reality of having nowhere to go. My house was in the process of being sold, my bank accounts empty. This is when Phyllis Gardner, my estranged sister, re-entered my life after nearly a decade of silence following a disagreement over our mother's care. "Margaret," she said, standing awkwardly in my hospital room after Catherine contacted her. "I heard what happened. It's unforgivable." She twisted her hands nervously. "My guest house is yours for as long as you need it." Our reunion was tentative at first, years of hurt and misunderstanding creating an invisible barrier between us. But Phyllis's generosity was genuine, and as she helped me navigate my new reality, our sisterly bond gradually strengthened. Other support arrived unexpectedly. My church congregation, who I'd withdrawn from after Frank's death, organized a meal train and transportation schedule. Former colleagues from the hospital where I'd worked for 30 years contributed to a fund for my immediate expenses. Stanley Palmer, my late husband's best friend and financial advisor, offered to cover Calvin's legal fees. "Frank would haunt me forever if I didn't help you through this, Margaret," Stanley said gruffly, uncomfortable with displays of emotion. With this growing network of support, I began formulating a strategy more complex than simply recovering my money. This was about justice, accountability, and reclaiming my relationship with my grandchildren. Calvin and I developed multiple scenarios for confronting Robert, each contingent on different legal and logistical factors. Through discreet social media monitoring, Stanley's college-aged granddaughter Zoe showed me how to create an anonymous profile. I learned that Robert's business was planning a grand opening event in 3 months. The company website featured photos of my son looking prosperous and confident, standing before a gleaming new office building purchased with my retirement funds. Using bank records Calvin had subpoenaed, we created a detailed timeline of asset transfers, proving the direct flow of money from my accounts to Swiss banks. Each statement, each transaction receipt became another piece of ammunition in my arsenal. "Preparation is everything," Calvin advised. "When you confront your son, you need irrefutable evidence and absolute clarity about your objectives." My objectives were becoming clearer by the day. Recover my money, ensure Robert faced consequences for his actions, and most importantly, reconnect with Emily and Jason, who were innocent victims in their father's scheme. As my discharge date approached, I found myself facing the future with a strange mixture of apprehension and anticipation. The Margaret Wilson who had entered the hospital would never have contemplated flying to Switzerland to confront her son. But that Margaret had died on the operating table. The woman who would leave the hospital was someone new, someone stronger, more determined, and far less willing to be victimized. On the morning of my hospital discharge, 3 months after my heart attack, Nurse Sophia brought me a small gift, a journal with my initials embossed on the leather cover. "To document your next chapter," she said, embracing me carefully. "You've become much more than a patient to me, Margaret. Promise you'll stay in touch." We exchanged personal contact information, and I vowed to update her on my journey. Dr. Lawrence arrived for a final consultation, his initial clinical detachment replaced by genuine admiration. "I've arranged for you to see Dr. Elena Vasquez for your ongoing cardiac care," he said, handing me a folder of medical records and prescriptions. "She's a former colleague and one of the best cardiologists in your sister's area. I've briefed her on your case." He hesitated before adding, "What you're planning pursuing your son internationally, it carries significant physical stress. Medically, I should advise against it. But personally?" I prompted. A small smile crossed his face. "Personally, I'd say give him hell, Mrs. Wilson." Catherine came to say goodbye as well, providing a folder containing resources for elder abuse victims and contact information for international legal services. "Your case has become something of a cause célèbre among the hospital's social work department," she admitted. "We're all rooting for you." As Stanley helped me navigate the wheelchair hospital policy required for discharge, an unexpected visitor appeared in the lobby. Marcus Fletcher, Robert's former business partner, whom I recognized from company picnics. "Mrs. Wilson," he exclaimed with apparent surprise. "I heard you were here. Robert asked me to check on you when I was in town." I immediately adopted the frail, confused demeanor I had practiced for just such an encounter. "Marcus, how kind," I said, making my voice weak and slightly tremulous. "I'm afraid I get so confused these days. How is Robert? I can't recall when I saw him last." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "He's well. Busy with the new venture overseas. I'm sure he'll call soon." "Overseas?" I repeated, feigning bewilderment. "I thought he lived across town. Is it Tuesday? I need my pills on Tuesday." Stanley, quickly catching on, took my arm protectively. "Come along, Margaret. You're getting tired. We need to get your medication sorted out." As we drove away, I watched Marcus through the rear window, already on his phone, undoubtedly reporting to Robert that his mother was disoriented and feeble. Perfect. Phyllis's guest house became my rehabilitation headquarters. A converted garden cottage behind her Victorian home. It offered privacy while keeping me close enough for assistance if needed. My sister had stocked the small kitchen with heart-healthy foods and arranged the furniture to minimize exertion. Our relationship, strained for years by our different perspectives on our mother's end-of-life care, gradually repaired itself through daily cups of tea and tentative conversations that eventually deepened into true reconciliation. "I was wrong," Phyllis admitted one evening. "I thought institutional care was best for Mother, but your in-home approach was more loving. I was just scared of the responsibility you took on so willingly. And I judged you too harshly for not wanting that burden," I conceded. "We both did what we thought was right." With Phyllis's encouragement, I pushed myself beyond the exercises Trevor had prescribed. Each morning began with gentle yoga, followed by progressively longer walks around the neighborhood. I practiced climbing stairs repeatedly, knowing Switzerland's terrain would challenge my still recovering heart. Cooking had always been my passion, and reclaiming this skill became part of my rehabilitation. Starting with simple soups, I gradually progressed to more complex dishes, building back the strength in my arms and the stamina to stand for longer periods. Phyllis joked that her neighbors were getting suspicious of her sudden culinary expertise when I sent over my excess creations. Meanwhile, preparing for Switzerland consumed my afternoons. I sold my remaining jewelry pieces Robert hadn't known about, stored in a safe deposit box to fund my travel expenses. Calvin helped me secure a new passport after we discovered Robert had taken my original one, presumably to impede any travel attempts. Stanley's wife Gretchen, who had spent her childhood in Germany, taught me basic German phrases 3 afternoons a week. Though many Swiss speak English, Gretchen insisted that attempting the local language would earn me goodwill and assistance.
Sprechen Sie Englisch, bitte.
I practiced diligently. "Do you speak English, please?" "Gut, gut," Gretchen would encourage. "But remember, in Switzerland they might speak Swiss German, which is different. Be prepared for confusion." Calvin helped me craft a cover story as a tourist interested in retirement properties, complete with brochures from Swiss real estate companies, and a carefully prepared list of questions about expatriate living. If Robert somehow discovered my presence before I was ready to confront him, this explanation would buy me time. As my departure date approached, anxiety and determination warred within me. During my final checkup with Dr. Vasquez, my blood pressure readings reflected this internal conflict. "Physically, you've made remarkable progress," she said. "But this stress isn't ideal for your cardiac recovery. Are you certain about this trip?" "More certain than I've been about anything in my life," I replied firmly. The night before my flight, Phyllis and I sat in her garden, watching fireflies emerge in the summer twilight. "I'm proud of you," she said unexpectedly. "Most people your age." "Our age," I corrected with a smile. "Our age," she acknowledged, "would accept defeat. You're fighting back." "I have to," I said simply. "Not just for the money but for Emily and Jason. They need to know their grandmother didn't abandon them." Our goodbye the next morning was emotional but not overwrought. We were New England women, after all, raised to keep our feelings in check. "I'll be back," I promised, embracing her. "With or without my money, but hopefully with a chance to rebuild my relationship with my grandchildren." The flight to Zurich via London taxed my still recovering body more than I had anticipated. During the transatlantic leg, chest discomfort prompted me to use the nitroglycerin tablets Dr. Vasquez had prescribed for emergencies. A concerned flight attendant named Bethany checked on me regularly, even moving me to a seat with more legroom when one became available. During my scheduled overnight layover in London recommended by Dr. Vasquez to break up the journey, I rested in an airport hotel, reviewing my plans and the dossier of information Calvin had prepared. Photos of Robert's business location, maps of Zurich, copies of financial records, and contact information for Swiss legal resources, all organized meticulously. As I boarded the final flight to Zurich the next morning, a mixture of determination and fear churned within me. I was a 68-year-old woman with a recently repaired heart, flying alone to a foreign country to confront the son who had betrayed me and stolen my life savings. By any rational measure, this was madness. But sometimes madness is the only sane response to injustice. As the plane lifted off British soil, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Robert believed he had left behind a dying old woman. He was about to meet someone altogether different. Zurich greeted me with unexpected warmth for early autumn, sunlight dancing across Lake Zurich as my taxi navigated from the airport to the modest pension I had booked in advance. Located in the Altstadt, Old Town, district, Pension Edelweiss occupied the third floor of a 16th-century building with no elevator, a challenge I had specifically chosen to test my recovery. By the time I reached the top of the narrow staircase, my heart pounded uncomfortably and perspiration dampened my blouse. But I had made it without stopping, a small victory I silently celebrated. Greta Weber, the pension's owner, was a robust woman in her 60s with silver hair cropped close to her head and piercing blue eyes that assessed me frankly. "You are not typical American tourist," she observed in accented English, helping me with my single suitcase. "They stay at Marriott, not old pension with no elevator." "I prefer authenticity over convenience," I replied, catching my breath. "And places with character." Greta's stern expression softened slightly. "Character we have plenty. Also excellent breakfast and quiet rooms. You will tell me if stairs are too much, ja? I can move you to first floor if necessary." My room was small but immaculate, with a window overlooking a cobblestone courtyard. The twin bed with its crisp white duvet, the small writing desk, the wardrobe barely large enough for my modest collection of clothes all reminded me of the student hostels I had stayed in during my one European trip nearly 50 years earlier. After unpacking, I ventured out for a brief orientation walk, following Greta's simple map to familiarize myself with the neighborhood. The cultural adjustment was immediate and jarring. Street signs in German, unfamiliar currency, the rapid-fire Swiss-German dialect that bore little resemblance to Gretchen's tutoring all reinforced that I was far from the comfortable predictability of Massachusetts. At a small cafe, I struggled to order coffee, my carefully practiced phrases deserting me in the moment. The young server, noting my confusion, switched to English with a kind smile. "First time in Switzerland?" he asked, bringing me a perfectly prepared cappuccino. "Is it that obvious?" I admitted. "Americans have a particular look when confronted with our menu prices," he joked. "Like they're considering selling a kidney to afford lunch." This interaction established a pattern for my first days in Zurich: initial linguistic fumbling followed by local accommodation, usually with good humor. I discovered that my age actually worked in my favor. Shopkeepers and restaurant staff showed more patience with an elderly woman attempting their language than they might have with younger tourists. On my third day, as I sat on a bench in Lindenhof, a hilltop park overlooking the city, fate delivered my first breakthrough. A school group passed through, children around 8 to 12 years old in matching blue caps. Among them, laughing as he kicked a small stone along the path, was Jason, my grandson, taller than I remembered, his face thinner, but unmistakably the boy I had last seen as he was loaded into an ambulance alongside me. My heart constricted, partly from emotion, partly from the physical stress of the sudden adrenaline surge. I pulled my sun hat lower and pretended to read my guidebook while discreetly watching him interact with his classmates. His German already sounded fluent to my untrained ear, and he appeared healthy and well-adjusted. The teacher called him Herr Wilson when he strayed too far from the group, confirming beyond doubt it was my Jason. I resisted the overwhelming urge to approach him, knowing that premature contact could alert Robert and jeopardize my entire plan. Instead, I noted the school name emblazoned on the children's caps: Internationale Schule Zurich. Another piece of information for my growing collection. With this confirmation that my family was indeed in Zurich, I intensified my intelligence gathering. At the public library, which offered computer access and English language assistance, I located Robert's business in an online directory, Wilson Medical Innovations AG, with an address in the city's business district. Finding the family's residence proved more challenging until a casual conversation with Greta yielded unexpected information. When I mentioned I was researching areas where American expatriates typically lived, she nodded knowingly. Many rich Americans in Kilchberg, very exclusive area by lake, she said while serving breakfast. Just last month, big house there sold to American family. Man with medical business, I think. My nephew works construction, did renovations for them. How interesting, I replied, striving to keep my voice neutral. What kind of renovations? Indoor swimming pool, very fancy security system. Greta shrugged. Rich people things. An indoor swimming pool. Emily had always loved swimming. This had to be them. I made a note of Kilchberg and later that day visited the lakeside suburb, an enclave of wealth with stunning views of Lake Zurich and the distant Alps. From the public waterfront path, I could see rows of elegant villas set back among manicured gardens. Without knowing the exact address, I couldn't identify Robert's house, but simply confirming the neighborhood advanced my understanding of their new life. Through conversations with shopkeepers in high-end stores, presenting myself as a curious retiree considering expatriate life, I gathered more threads of information about the American family with the medical export business. Apparently, Robert and Diane had quickly established themselves among the expatriate social circles, hosting lavish dinner parties and joining the prestigious Zurich Yacht Club. They spend quite freely, confided a boutique owner who specialized in designer children's clothing. The wife bought 5 cashmere sweaters for her daughter last week. Nearly 2,000 francs. Said the girl needed a proper winter wardrobe. $1,000 on sweaters for a 12-year-old, purchased with my retirement savings. The extravagance stung, but it also suggested that Robert might be burning through the money faster than anticipated. This suspicion found confirmation in a small article in a local business journal I found in the pension's reading room. Though written in German, I could decipher enough with my translation app to understand that Wilson Medical Innovations AG had made a splashy entry into the market, but was facing supply chain challenges and regulatory hurdles. The accompanying photo showed Robert looking less confident than in his website pictures, strain visible around his eyes as he stood beside a stern-looking man identified as Victor Bergman, his Swiss business partner. With this knowledge, I began what Phyllis would have called my spy operations, establishing regular observation points near the children's school and Robert's office building. From a cafe across from the school, I managed to photograph Emily exiting one afternoon, her blonde hair now cut in a stylish bob, looking simultaneously older and more vulnerable than the granddaughter I remembered. The following day, from a bench near Robert's office building, I witnessed an argument between my son and his business partner Victor. Though too distant to hear their words, the body language conveyed tension, Victor gesturing emphatically, while Robert adopted a placating posture. They parted without shaking hands, Victor checking his watch with obvious impatience before striding away. Most significantly, I overheard a conversation between Robert and Diane outside a restaurant where I was coincidentally dining. Seated on the patio, shielded by a large menu, I listened as they argued in hushed but intense tones. The Bergmans are asking questions about our investment capital, Robert hissed. Victor wants to see original banking transfers. Can't you just show him the documents you prepared? Diane asked, adjusting her designer sunglasses. He's not stupid, Diane. Swiss bankers notice discrepancies. If he connects the dots back to Mom's accounts. She's probably dead by now anyway, Diane interrupted callously. Marcus said she couldn't even remember what day it was. Their conversation shifted as the maitre d' approached, but I had heard enough. The business was facing scrutiny, and Robert was worried about his financial paper trail. This vulnerability would be crucial to my strategy. With a clearer picture of the situation, I scheduled a consultation with Claudia Zimmerman, a Swiss attorney specializing in international financial disputes whom Calvin had recommended. Her office near Paradeplatz radiated old-world prosperity leather chairs, oak paneling, discreet lighting. "Mrs. Wilson," she greeted me in perfect English, reviewing the documents I had brought. "Your case presents several interesting jurisdictional questions. Your son has clearly violated American laws, but establishing Swiss court authority will be challenging without evidence of Swiss law violations." "What about the money itself?" I asked. "It was obtained fraudulently." "That's our strongest argument," she agreed. "Particularly if we can demonstrate that his business partner and investors were misled about the source of his capital. Swiss business culture places high value on transparency and ethical conduct." Claudia outlined potential approaches, emphasizing that gathering evidence of how Robert represented his funding sources to Swiss institutions would significantly strengthen our position. She also suggested establishing contact with the American embassy, which could provide additional support for cross-border legal issues. My final preparatory step fell into place through an unexpected connection. During breakfast one morning, I mentioned to Greta that I was researching local medical equipment companies for a friend considering investment opportunities. "Like that new American company having big party next week?" she asked. "Wilson Medical something. My nephew doing catering staff for event." My pulse quickened. "Do you know where and when exactly?" Greta nodded. "Big reception at their offices. Very fancy, important Swiss business people invited." She studied my expression. "You want to attend? My nephew could perhaps add name to staff list. Many extra servers needed." I shook my head. "No, but I'd be interested in attending as a guest." "Does your nephew have access to the invitation list?" Greta's eyes narrowed slightly, her first show of suspicion about my interest. "Why so curious about this company, Mrs. Wilson? Same name as yours, I notice." The moment had come for a partial truth. "The owner is a relative," I admitted. "We've lost touch. I'd like to surprise him." Greta considered this, then nodded slowly. "Family reconciliation. This I understand. I will speak with my nephew." 2 days later, Greta presented me with an elegant cream-colored invitation to the grand opening reception of Wilson Medical Innovations AG. How she had secured it I didn't ask, but her knowing smile suggested that her network in Zurich extended further than I had imagined. "Thank you," I said, genuinely moved by her assistance. "We older women must stick together," she replied simply. "Men think we are finished, no longer important. Sometimes we must show them their mistake." With the invitation in hand, I contacted Claudia to finalize our strategy for the confrontation. All the pieces were now in place, evidence collected, legal groundwork laid, timing planned. After 3 weeks in Zurich, I was ready to reveal myself to the son who had left me for dead. The evening of the Wilson Medical Innovations grand opening reception arrived with picture-perfect Swiss efficiency. Even the weather cooperated, providing a clear autumn night with the Alps silhouetted against the darkening sky. I dressed carefully in a conservative black pantsuit purchased specifically for this occasion, accessorized with a single strand of pearls Frank had given me on our 25th anniversary, one of the few valuable items Robert hadn't managed to take. As my taxi approached the gleaming glass office building in Zurich's business district, illuminated for the event with strategic lighting that emphasized its modern architecture, butterflies of anxiety performed elaborate maneuvers in my stomach. I took a slow, deep breath, remembering Dr. Vasquez's breathing techniques for managing stress-induced cardiac symptoms. "You can do this, Margaret," I whispered to myself as I paid the driver. "For Emily and Jason." The lobby had been transformed into an elegant reception area with white-clothed high tables, champagne fountains, and trays of hors d'oeuvres circulated by servers in crisp uniforms. A string quartet played unobtrusively in one corner. Approximately 70 guests mingled, predominantly older men in expensive suits, accompanied by elegantly dressed women. Several conversations around me took place in German, others in English with various European accents. I positioned myself strategically near a large potted palm, partially concealed while maintaining a clear view of the small stage erected at the far end of the lobby. Claudia had coached me on timing. Wait until Robert was fully committed to his public moment before making my presence known. A distinguished-looking man I recognized as Victor Bergman from my research approached the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues and investors, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the official launch of Wilson Medical Innovations AG. Please join me in welcoming our CEO and founder, Mr. Robert Wilson. Applause filled the room as my son stepped onto the stage. At 45, Robert had always been handsome in the conventional sense, tall, with my late husband's strong jaw and my own hazel eyes. Tonight, he looked every inch the successful international businessman in his tailored suit, though I could detect signs of strain beneath his confident smile. "Thank you, Victor, and thank you all for joining us this evening," Robert began smoothly. "When I first envisioned bringing American medical innovation to European markets, I knew it would require partners who shared my vision and commitment to excellence." I allowed him to continue his practice speech, cataloging the company's supposedly bright prospects and revolutionary products. As he warmed to his theme, gesturing enthusiastically while describing projected growth figures, I began my careful movement through the crowd toward the stage. "None of this would have been possible without significant personal investment," Robert continued. "My family has committed everything to this venture because we believe so strongly in its potential." That was my cue. I stepped into the open space directly in front of the stage and spoke clearly, my voice carrying in the momentary silence following his statement. "Everything, including your mother's retirement savings, Robert? Stolen while I lay unconscious in intensive care." The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Robert froze mid-gesture, his face draining of color as he registered my presence. A collective gasp rippled through the assembled guests, followed by a buzz of confused whispers. "Mom!" Robert's voice cracked, his professional demeanor shattering. "How are you? Alive?" I finished for him, moving closer to the stage. "Disappointing, isn't it? All that careful planning, and here I am very much alive and standing in your lovely new lobby, purchased with my money." Victor Bergman stepped forward, confusion evident on his face. "Robert, what is happening? Who is this woman?" Robert recovered some composure, signaling discreetly to security personnel positioned near the doors. "My mother is unwell," he announced loudly. "She's suffering from cognitive decline following a heart attack. This is unfortunate and embarrassing, but—" "I'm perfectly cogent," I interrupted, reaching into my handbag to withdraw the folder of documents Claudia had prepared. "And I've brought evidence of wire transfers from my personal accounts to Swiss banks, executed using a forged power of attorney, while I was in a medically induced coma." Two security guards approached, one gently taking my arm. "Madam, please come with us." "Before you remove me," I said loudly, "you might want to ask Mr. Bergman if he knew the initial capital for this company came from elder financial abuse. It's a federal crime in the United States, and I believe Swiss banking regulations have something to say about accepting fraudulently obtained funds." Victor's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. He said something sharp in German to the security guards, who immediately released my arm. The commotion had drawn attention throughout the room. Near the champagne fountain I spotted Diane, wearing an emerald green cocktail dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her expression transformed from confusion to horror as she recognized me. Most gut-wrenching of all, Emily and Jason stood near her, dressed formally for what should have been their father's triumphant evening. Emily's hand flew to her mouth in shock, while Jason's face lit up with unrestrained joy. "Grandma!" he shouted, breaking free from Diane's suddenly grasping hand and running toward me. Emily followed a moment later, both children colliding with me in an embrace that nearly knocked me off balance. "We thought you were dead," Emily sobbed against my shoulder. "Dad said your heart couldn't be fixed. Dad said we couldn't even go to the funeral because it was too dangerous to fly back," Jason added, his arms wrapped tightly around my waist. The guests watched this scene unfold with expressions ranging from confusion to growing suspicion. Victor Bergman had moved to examine the documents I'd brought, his face darkening as he flipped through bank statements and power of attorney forms. "Robert," Victor said, his voice dangerously quiet, "perhaps we should continue this discussion privately." "There's nothing to discuss," Robert snapped, descending from the stage. "My mother is confused. These documents prove nothing." "Then you won't mind explaining why transfers from her accounts match exactly the seed capital you claimed came from your successful American business?" I challenged. Or why you forged her signature on power of attorney documents the day she had emergency heart surgery. The room had gone completely silent, all pretense of a celebration abandoned as guests watched the drama unfold. Several people were discreetly recording the confrontation on their phones. You've always been jealous of my success, Robert attempted, his voice rising defensively. You never supported my business ventures. Always criticizing, always doubting. I remortgaged my house to fund your first business, I reminded him calmly. I co-signed the loan for your second. I've supported every endeavor you've undertaken, Robert, until this one built on theft and the expectation of my death. Diane finally approached, her face a careful mask of concern. Margaret, you don't understand what happened. Robert was trying to protect your assets. After the doctors said you wouldn't recover. The doctors said I had a 10% chance. I corrected. Not 0. And even if I had died, that wouldn't give Robert the right to steal my estate from the other beneficiaries named in my will. Emily, still holding my hand tightly, looked up at her mother. You said Grandma left everything to us. You said that's why we could afford to move here. Diane's careful composure fractured. Emily, it's complicated. It's not complicated at all, I interrupted, addressing not just Diane but the entire room. My son forged documents to gain control of my finances while I was unconscious. He transferred my life savings over $2 million to Swiss accounts. He told my grandchildren I was dead. He abandoned me in a hospital, expecting me to die alone. These aren't the actions of a loving son protecting his mother's assets. These are the actions of a thief and a fraud. Victor Bergman had finished reviewing the documents and was now on his phone, speaking rapid German while maintaining eye contact with Robert. Other guests were edging toward the exits, the celebratory mood thoroughly destroyed. Robert made one final desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Mother, you're causing a scene. Let's discuss this privately, as a family. We stopped being a family the moment you decided my life was worth less than my bank accounts, I replied steadily. Now we're adversaries in a legal dispute that spans 2 countries. You can't prove anything, Robert hissed, dropping all pretense. It's your word against mine. Actually, came Claudia's voice as she entered the lobby right on schedule. Mrs. Wilson has extensive documentation, including banking records, medical reports, and testimony from hospital staff. And now, she gestured around the room at the shocked faces and recording phones, she has witnesses to your reaction when confronted. Robert's face contorted with rage. You vindictive old. Robert. Diane cut him off, grabbing his arm. Stop talking. Now. As security guards, now uncertain whose instructions to follow, hovered nearby, Victor stepped between Robert and me. I believe, Victor said coldly, that this reception is concluded. I must ask all guests to depart while we address this serious matter. He turned to Robert. My office. Immediately. As the crowd reluctantly dispersed, murmuring among themselves, I found myself surrounded by a protective circle formed by Claudia, Emily, and Jason. I missed you so much, Grandma, Jason said, his voice small. I knew you couldn't be dead. I just knew it. Emily, more perceptive at 12, studied my face. You came all the way to Switzerland by yourself? After heart surgery? For you too? I would have crawled if necessary, I told her, touching her cheek gently. 2 uniformed police officers entered the lobby, responding to a call from whom, I wasn't certain. Victor approached them, speaking in Swiss German and gesturing toward Robert, who now stood isolated, his business dreams visibly crumbling around him. Diane approached our small circle, her confidence replaced by uncertainty. Margaret, please. The children need stability. Whatever Robert did was done with your knowledge, I finished for her. You lived in my house for 5 years, Diane. You knew my wishes, my estate plans. You knew I would never have approved of uprooting the children from their schools and friends. He said we'd lose everything if we didn't act quickly, she admitted, her voice dropping. The business was failing. There were investors threatening lawsuits. He convinced me this was our only option. So you decided my life was an acceptable sacrifice? Diane couldn't meet my eyes. I told myself you were already gone. That the doctors were just prolonging the inevitable. Emily pulled away from her mother. You lied to us. You said Grandma died peacefully. That she wouldn't want us to be sad. The police officers were now speaking with Robert, examining identification documents. His posture had changed from defiance to defeat. His shoulders slumped as the inevitable consequences of his actions became clear. What happens now, Grandma? Jason asked, sensing the gravity of the situation despite his young age. I looked at Claudia, who nodded encouragingly. Now, I said, gathering both children close, we begin putting things right. It won't be simple and it won't happen overnight. But we're together again, and that's the most important first step. As the police led Robert toward the exit for what they explained was further questioning, he locked eyes with me one final time. In that moment, I saw something unexpected beneath his anger and fear, a flicker of the little boy who had once run to me with skinned knees and broken toys, trusting his mother to make everything better. But some things, once broken, can never be fully repaired. As Robert disappeared through the doors, I turned my full attention to my grandchildren, the true innocents in this tragic scenario. Whatever came next, their well-being would be my priority, just as it should have been Robert's all along. The weeks following the confrontation unfolded in a blur of legal meetings, emotional conversations, and difficult decisions. The Swiss authorities, once presented with evidence of financial fraud, moved with surprising speed. Robert's business and personal accounts were frozen pending investigation. Victor Bergman, eager to distance himself from the scandal, cooperated fully with authorities, providing additional evidence of questionable financial representations Robert had made to secure their partnership. Calvin flew to Zurich to coordinate with Claudia on the international legal aspects of the case. Their combined expertise navigated the complex jurisdictional issues, creating a unified approach that bridged American and Swiss legal systems. The Swiss prosecutor's office, concerned about potential damage to the country's banking reputation, prioritized the case. Financial crimes involving international transfers are taken extremely seriously here, Claudia explained during one of our daily briefings. The authorities want to demonstrate that Switzerland is no longer a haven for ill-gotten gains. Robert, following his attorney's advice, eventually negotiated a settlement rather than face trial in two countries. Under its terms, all remaining funds derived from my accounts would be returned, and Robert would face reduced charges in the United States after extradition. The agreement included a supervised payment plan for the money already spent, nearly 40% of my original savings. He'll face consequences, Calvin assured me, but not the maximum penalties possible. Is that acceptable to you, Margaret? I considered the question carefully. Will he serve time? Yes. The plea agreement includes 18 months in federal prison, followed by probation and community service. Without it, he could face up to 15 years. I thought of Emily and Jason, who had already lost so much. The settlement is acceptable, I decided. Further punishment won't restore what was taken, not just money, but trust and family bonds. The most wrenching conversations were with my grandchildren. We sat in the small garden behind the apartment Claudia had helped me secure, the children trying to understand how their father could have done something so fundamentally wrong. Did Dad really think you were going to die? Jason asked, his 8-year-old mind struggling with concepts no child should have to confront. He convinced himself of that, I answered carefully. Sometimes adults tell themselves stories that make bad choices seem okay. Emily, more direct at 12, asked the question that clearly haunted her. Did he ever really love us? Or were we just part of his plan? My heart broke for her. Your father loves you both very much, I assured her. People can love deeply and still make terrible mistakes. The two aren't mutually exclusive. But how can we ever trust him again? She pressed, wise beyond her years. Trust, once broken, must be earned back slowly, I told her. It may take years, and it will require honesty and consistent action on his part. But it is possible. Diane's situation presented another complex challenge. While she had participated in the deception, evidence suggested Robert had been the architect of the scheme, with Diane following his lead. After several difficult conversations, some involving raised voices and tears, we reached an understanding. I should have questioned him, she admitted during one particularly honest exchange. I knew something wasn't right, but it was easier to believe we were doing what was necessary for the family's future. You chose loyalty to your husband over ethical behavior, I said. I understand the impulse, even if I can't condone the choice. Unlike Robert, Diane seemed genuinely remorseful, particularly about the lies told to the children. When she asked if I could ever forgive her, I gave the only honest answer possible. Forgiveness isn't a single moment, Diane. It's a process that takes time. I'm willing to begin that process, primarily for Emily and Jason's sake. We established new boundaries and trust mechanisms, including financial transparency requirements and regular family counseling. Diane would retain primary custody of the children while Robert served his sentence, but I would have generous visitation rights and input on major decisions affecting their well-being. As the legal matters progressed toward resolution, I faced a significant decision of my own: return to Massachusetts or remain in Switzerland near my grandchildren. Phyllis, during our daily phone calls, urged me to come home. Your support system is here, Margaret, she argued. Your doctors, your friends, your church. But my grandchildren are there, I countered. And at my age, every year is precious. I can't lose more time with them. The solution emerged unexpectedly through my friendship with Greta, whose pension had become my temporary home during the legal proceedings. Over coffee one morning, she mentioned her desire to scale back her responsibilities. Running pension is young person's job now, she sighed. Too many stairs, too many details to manage. Have you considered taking on a partner? I suggested. Someone to handle day-to-day operations while you focus on the aspects you enjoy? Greta studied me thoughtfully. Someone like retired hospital administrator with experience managing complex organizations? And so, almost accidentally, a new business partnership was born. I invested a portion of my recovered funds in Pension Edelweiss, becoming co-owner and operational manager while Greta focused on her beloved cooking and guest relations. The arrangement allowed me to establish roots in Switzerland, while maintaining the flexibility to travel back to Massachusetts periodically. With stable housing and income secured, I turned my attention to broader advocacy. My experience had revealed the vulnerability of elderly individuals to financial exploitation, particularly across international boundaries. Working with Catherine from the hospital's social work department, who remained a steadfast ally and friend, I established a support and education group for victims of elder financial abuse. Your case study is powerful, Catherine told me during one of our video calls. You've given hope to people who thought justice was impossible. The most challenging decision came 1 year after my arrival in Switzerland, when Robert, now serving his sentence in a minimum security federal prison, requested a visit. I postponed my response multiple times, uncertain whether seeing him would provide closure or reopen wounds. After much reflection and several sessions with a therapist Claudia recommended, I finally agreed to a supervised meeting at the prison. Robert, thinner and subdued in his prison uniform, seemed to have aged a decade in a single year. Thank you for coming, he began awkwardly. I didn't think you would. I nearly didn't, I admitted. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us until Robert spoke again. I've had a lot of time to think about what I did. The therapist here says I need to take full responsibility without excuses. That seems like good advice. I betrayed you in the worst possible way, he continued, his voice catching. I violated your trust when you were at your most vulnerable. I stole not just your money but your dignity and your relationship with your grandchildren. I have no justification for any of it. I studied his face, searching for the son I had raised, the boy who once had such clear understanding of right and wrong. Why, Robert? Was the money really worth destroying our family? It wasn't about the money, not entirely, he confessed. The business was failing. Investors were threatening lawsuits. I felt like a failure in every way as a businessman, as a provider. When you had the heart attack and the doctors were so pessimistic. He paused. I saw an escape, a way to start over without facing the consequences of my failures. At my expense. Yes, he acknowledged. I convinced myself you wouldn't survive, that I was simply accelerating an inevitable outcome. It was a horrible rationalization. We talked for the full allowed hour, not reaching any neat resolution or tearful reconciliation, but perhaps establishing a foundation for whatever relationship might be possible in the future. Before leaving, I informed him of the trust funds I had established for Emily and Jason, structured to protect their inheritance regardless of future family dynamics. "That's more consideration than I showed you," he acknowledged. "Thank you for looking after them." "I'm their grandmother," I said simply. "It's what we do." As the first anniversary of my arrival in Switzerland approached, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought me from a hospital bed in Massachusetts to co-ownership of a Swiss pension. Life had taken an unimaginable turn, yet somehow I had landed on my feet, perhaps standing taller and more confidently than before. The final symbolic moment of closure came on a crisp autumn day when I gathered with Emily, Jason, and Diane by Lake Zurich. From my handbag, I withdrew the forged power of attorney documents that had started this ordeal, copies provided by Calvin for this specific purpose, the originals secured as legal evidence. "These papers represent broken trust and painful decisions," I explained to my grandchildren. "But they also represent the beginning of our new chapter together." With deliberate movements, I tore the documents into small pieces. Emily and Jason each took handfuls, and together we scattered them over the water, watching as they dissolved and disappeared beneath the surface. "Not forgotten," I said quietly, "but no longer defining our family story." That evening, as I sat in my apartment above Pension Edelweiss, I opened the journal Sophia had given me upon my hospital discharge. Though I had recorded various events throughout my journey, many pages remained blank, waiting, it seemed, for the continuing story of a life I had nearly lost but instead had reclaimed and reinvented. On a fresh page I wrote, "Today marks 1 year since I arrived in Switzerland seeking justice. What I found instead was a new beginning. At 69, when many believe life's significant chapters are complete, I find myself authoring an unexpected sequel. The betrayal that brought me here will always be part of my story, but it no longer defines my future." Has someone in your family ever betrayed your trust? How did you handle it, and were you able to rebuild your relationship? Please share your experiences in the comments below. If you found inspiration in my journey to reclaim what was rightfully mine, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of resilience and renewal. Remember that it's never too late to stand up for yourself and write a new chapter in your life story. Thank you for joining me today, and may you find the strength to face your own challenges with courage and determination.